The film opens with a sense of quiet precision, introducing Frank Martin, a highly skilled, disciplined, and professional getaway driver who operates with strict rules. The film begins in the city of Nice, France, where Frank, dressed sharply in a black suit and leather gloves, sits inside his customized black BMW 735i, waiting outside a parking garage. The tense atmosphere is immediately set as Frank checks his watch, showing his meticulous nature. Frank has been hired as a getaway driver for a bank heist. As the bank robbers rush into his car with bags of stolen money, the tension rises when they try to force him to break his own rules. Frank's first rule is that he never changes the deal. The robbers demand that he take on an extra passenger, but Frank refuses, insisting that the agreed-upon number of passengers was 3, not 4. He remains calm and unshaken even as the criminals threaten him with guns, showcasing his unbreakable professionalism. Reluctantly, Frank agrees to transport them, but his strict adherence to his own terms foreshadows his strong moral code. As soon as they drive off, the chase begins. The police, already in pursuit, flood the streets with patrol cars, setting up roadblocks and forcing Frank to demonstrate his extreme driving skills. He maneuvers the car through tight alleyways, performs sharp drifts, and even evades a roadblock by calculating the exact moment to drive through a moving truck's cargo hold, escaping in spectacular fashion. During the chase, Frank remains completely composed, never losing his cool despite the high-speed pursuit. He outsmarts the police at every turn, using his surroundings to his advantage. After the intense chase, Frank arrives at the agreed drop-off point. Before allowing the robbers to leave, he enforces his final rule: no one opens the bag in his car. When one of the robbers tries to check their stolen money, Frank swiftly subdues him. With the job complete, the robbers take their bags and leave, unaware that Frank has memorized every detail of their faces and vehicle. After completing the bank robbery getaway, Frank returns to his secluded villa, located in the picturesque countryside of France. He meticulously washes his car, removing any trace of evidence that could link him to the crime. As he wipes down the exterior, he turns on the TV, which is broadcasting the latest news updates. A reporter covers the bank robbery, revealing that most of the gang was apprehended earlier that morning. Frank listens carefully, his movements slowing slightly as he waits to hear if his name or any identifying details are mentioned. When nothing ties him to the crime, he allows himself a moment of relief. Just as he finishes cleaning, Frank receives an unexpected visit from Inspector Turconi, an old acquaintance who has been suspicious of Frank for some time. Turconi, a sharp but somewhat friendly investigator, admires Frank's car, making small talk before quickly cutting to the real reason for his visit. He brings up the robbery and mentions that the police were chasing a driver with almost supernatural skills behind the wheel. His eyes scan Frank's car, looking for any trace of debris or damage. Frank remains calm, and states that he was home all day. Turconi knows Frank is careful, but without evidence, he has no choice but to leave. Later, Frank receives a call from an unknown number. The caller has heard of Frank's driving expertise and wants to hire him for a transport job. That night, Frank arrives at a bar, where a group of well-dressed men awaits him. Their leader explains the details of the job. Frank insists on knowing the exact weight of what he will be transporting, explaining that weight distribution is crucial for his car's performance. One of the men assures him that it won't be an issue. Frank also makes it clear that he doesn't take names or ask unnecessary questions. The leader hands him an upfront payment of 50%, promising the rest after delivery. The next morning, a black sedan pulls up behind Frank's car, and two men place a large, tightly sealed bag into his trunk. Without hesitation, Frank drives off, sticking to his policy of not opening the package. However, as he speeds down a winding road, one of his tires goes flat. Frustrated but still composed, he pulls over to change it. When he opens the trunk to retrieve the spare, he is shocked to see the bag moving. His instinct tells him to ignore it and stay professional, so he simply removes the spare tire and continues fixing the flat one. Once back on the road, his curiosity gets the better of him. He pulls over again, unzips the bag, and is stunned to find a young woman bound and gagged inside. She has fear in her eyes. He tears the tape from her mouth, assuming she must be thirsty, and lets her drink his juice. Despite the unsettling situation, Frank reminds himself of his rules and places her back into the bag before driving off. Minutes later, the woman begins kicking inside the trunk, forcing Frank to stop yet again. He opens the trunk, and she pleads for him to let her use the restroom. Maintaining his no-nonsense attitude, Frank agrees but ties a rope around her neck to ensure she doesn't escape. She rushes into the bushes, but just as he starts pulling the rope, he realizes she has slipped away. Frank doesn't panic, he knows he can track her down. As he walks through the dense foliage, the girl sprints through the trees. Suddenly, Frank appears in front of her, blocking her escape route. Without saying a word, he grabs her and takes her back to the car. Later, Frank arrives at the drop-off location, a large estate where he meets a gang leader named Wall. He hands the girl over to Wall's guards, keeping his expression unreadable. The men give him the second half of his payment. As Frank is about to leave, Wall makes him an offer, one last delivery. He hands Frank another duffel bag, supposedly containing cargo that needs to be transported. Frank, never one to ask questions, accepts the job and drives away. Stopping at a small gas station, Frank buys a sandwich and sits inside to eat. However, his thoughts keep drifting back to the girl. As he walks back to his car, an explosion rips through the air. His BMW is engulfed in flames. His eyes widen as he realizes what just happened. The package he was supposed to deliver was a bomb meant to eliminate him. Understanding that Wall betrayed him, Frank storms back to the estate. He kicks down the door and takes down the guards with brutal efficiency, using his hand-to-hand combat skills to dispatch them one by one. Meanwhile, in another room, the girl is struggling to free herself from her restraints. In the garage, Frank selects a new vehicle, a sleek Mercedes, and speeds away. After a few minutes of driving, he glances in the rearview mirror and sees the girl hiding in the back. He immediately stops the car and pulls her out, leaving her in the middle of the road. Without a word, he gets back in and drives off. However, guilt gnaws at him. After a brief moment of hesitation, he slams on the brakes, sighs heavily, and reverses. He picks the girl up again and places her in the trunk. Back at his villa, Frank places the girl in the kitchen and finally asks for her name. She introduces herself as Lai but doesn't reveal much else. Frank, still not fully trusting her, keeps his distance and prepares a bowl of noodles for her to eat. Before heading to bed, he tells her she is free to leave if she wants. Later that night, Lai, now feeling a bit more comfortable, explores the house. She finds an old military uniform and a badge, realizing that Frank was once a soldier. The next morning, Frank wakes up and finds Lai still in the house, moving around the kitchen as if she belongs there. She has made herself at home, preparing breakfast for both of them. Despite his usual lone wolf nature, Frank watches her for a moment, realizing how comfortable she seems. They sit down and eat together in a rare moment of peace. A few minutes later, Inspector Turconi makes an unannounced visit. He greets Frank casually as he steps inside, clearly suspicious but maintaining his friendly demeanor. As he takes a seat, Lai, playing the role of Frank's personal chef, attends to both men and offers them cookies. He places a burnt number plate on the table. It's from Frank's BMW, the one that exploded at the gas station. Turconi directly asks Frank what happened to his car. Frank, keeping his expression neutral, lies and tells him that it was stolen, but he forgot to report it to the police. Turconi, not fully convinced, shifts his attention to the car currently sitting in Frank's garage. He asks to see it. Frank, maintaining his cool, walks him to the garage and shows him the vehicle. Turconi thoroughly inspects it, but there's nothing suspicious about it. He decides to let it go for now and leaves, but he clearly suspects that something deeper is going on between Frank and Lai. Not long after Turconi leaves, chaos erupts. A missile is suddenly launched toward Frank's house. The explosion shakes the entire structure, and Frank and Lai are forced to take cover under the table as debris crashes around them. Thinking quickly, Frank reveals a secret escape tunnel leading to the sea. He throws Lai into the passage and follows closely behind. They swim away as the wreckage of Frank's house collapses behind them. The two emerge from the water at a secluded dock, where Lai is shocked to discover that Frank has another hidden property. Frank, however, is furious. He realizes that saving Lai has ruined the peaceful life he worked so hard to build. Lai, feeling guilty, apologizes for dragging him into her problems. She leans in and kisses him. Later, Frank and Lai go to the police station to report the destruction of Frank's home. They fabricate a story, telling Turconi that they were out for a walk on the beach, and when they returned, they found the house in ruins. Turconi listens but finds it hard to believe them. Before he can push further, an officer interrupts, needing Turconi's assistance. As Turconi steps away, Lai seizes the opportunity. She quickly hacks into the police database, searching for information about who ordered the attack on Frank's house. Their search leads them to Wall, confirming that he's behind everything. They leave the police station, and as they walk outside, Lai suggests they take revenge on Wall. Frank, however, has had enough. He tells Lai that she's free now, she can go and start her life over, just as he intends to do. He starts to walk away, but Lai finally opens up. She tells him that Wall has her family locked in a shipping container. She reveals that her family and many others are being smuggled into France as part of a human trafficking operation. Desperate, she begs Frank to help her. Later that day, They infiltrate Wall's office. Frank holds him at gunpoint while Lie searches through his documents, trying to find which ship is holding her family. Just as they start getting answers, the door swings open, and Lie's father walks in. Frank is confused. Lie had told him that her father was being held captive, yet here he is, free and unharmed. It becomes clear that Lie lied to Frank. Her father is actually working with Wall in the trafficking operation. Wall and Lie's father exchange glances before receiving a call from one of their guards, warning them that the police are on their way upstairs. Thinking fast, Wall and Lie's father decide to turn the situation to their advantage. They knock Frank unconscious. When Turconi and his officers arrive, Wall and Lie's father fabricate a story, telling Turconi that Frank kidnapped Lie and was attempting to extort them. With Frank unable to defend himself, Turconi has no choice but to arrest him. Later, in the police station, Frank regains consciousness. Turconi questions him about what really happened. Frank, knowing this might be his only chance, tells Turconi the truth, that Lie's father and Wall are smuggling people into France through containers, selling them into human trafficking. Turconi listens carefully. Though he has no solid proof, he believes Frank's story. However, getting Frank out of jail isn't simple. Turconi tells Frank that the only way to let him go without suspicion is to make it look like he escaped. Frank agrees. Turconi subtly helps stage the escape, and Frank breaks out of the police station undetected. Frank immediately drives into town and heads straight for the docks, where the trafficking operation is taking place. With determination in his eyes, he prepares to take on Wall, rescue Lie, and put an end to the smuggling ring. Later, Frank arrives at the loading dock under the cover of darkness, carefully sneaking around to avoid being seen. Moving through the shadows, he spots several guards patrolling the area and silently takes down one of them. The noise of the fight alerts Wall and the rest of his men. Seeing Wall getting away, Frank acts fast. He sprints and leaps onto a passing truck, holding onto the side before climbing onto the roof. He spots a smaller car nearby, and commandeers the vehicle to chase after Wall. Frank speeds down the highway, determined to catch up, but after a couple of miles, the car breaks down. Frustrated but undeterred, he abandons the vehicle and sprints to a nearby local airport. There, he meets the owner of a small plane and quickly convinces him to help. The pilot takes off, flying toward Wall's convoy of trucks. As they approach the trucks, Frank opens the plane's door and, without hesitation, jumps out. He lands on the top of one of the trucks. Quickly regaining his balance, he breaks into the truck, takes out the driver, and brings the vehicle to a halt by the side of the road. Just as he thinks he has control of the situation, Lie's father appears and holds him at gunpoint. He forces Frank to step out of the truck and walks him toward a cliff. As Lie's father prepares to pull the trigger, Frank grabs a rock from the ground, ready to fight for his life. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. But it isn't Frank who gets shot, it's Lie's father. Shocked, Frank turns to see Lie standing there, a gun still trembling in her hands. She has just shot her own father to save Frank. He embraces her, offering comfort and reassurance. Moments later, Turconi and his officers arrive, securing the area and rescuing all the people who were locked inside the containers. With the trafficking operation finally dismantled, Frank and Lie stand side by side, knowing that the nightmare is over.